I was going to record my video today later on when I was not driving, but I had some last minute changes, to my schedule today, so I'm doing my video in my car. And I hope that this turns out okay. You can hear me over the road noise in the background. You know, there used to be a time, and well, still there is a time sometimes, you can ask my wife. I'm not great with last minute changes. A lot of the time, it's still something I'm working through, but today, last minute changes happen. I realize it doesn't have to be a big problem if I don't make it a big problem. It's simply a situation that I need to work through. Are there logistical changes? Yes. Are there things that I have to shift around? Yes. Is that a problem? Not unless I make it one. So today I'm not making it one, and look at me, I am a mature adult today. I'm thinking out loud today in my video, and it's this idea about the willingness to be wrong, or the willingness to fail. I think her name is Sara Blakely, the founder of Spanx. I think she's the world's first female self-made billionaire. And her, not just claim to fame, but her fame was in inventing or introducing, discovering, creating, whatever the word is, Spanx. And I remember what I heard her say on a podcast one time is that she'd come home from school every day, and her dad at dinner would ask her and her brother, "What did you fail at today?" And I always thought that was a funny question. But I thought, it worked for Sara Blakely. She's a billionaire because apparently her dad asked her this question. And so I started asking my kids at dinner time, "Hey, what'd you fail at today?" And nobody could come up with something they failed at today. And well, to be honest, I hadn't failed at anything that day, so I didn't know really where to take that. I just thought that was an interesting question that Sarah's dad used on her, and so I thought I'd use it on my kids and maybe make them a billionaire, because that's how it works, right? And what I realized is it's not about what did you fail at today, but what did you do that you were willing to fail at today. And even now, as I'm realizing it, very well in the podcast, Sarah may have talked about her dad asking the question, "What were you willing to fail at today?" But what I heard was, this is a couple years ago, "What did you fail at today?" I'm going to reframe it as, what are you willing to fail at? Or what are you willing to be wrong at? What I've realized for me is that when I'm not willing to be wrong at something, I have to predict that it's going to be right. And in order for me to predict that it's going to be right, I can't do anything different than I've done before. I can't try anything new. I can't introduce a new variable. I can't do something slightly different than I've done it before because I don't know that it's going to work. So really, I stay stuck. The unwillingness to be wrong, or the unwillingness to fail at something, is a recipe for being stuck. But really, being stuck is also the way to always know that you're going to be right. And so I was caught in between this thing where I always wanted to be right and I didn't want to be stuck. But that's about the same thing, at least this way that I'm thinking about it. And so part of my growth journey and being authentic and being vulnerable and being courageous is the willingness to do new things. Which really, another way of saying it for me, is a willingness to be wrong, or a willingness to fail, realizing that it's not about wanting to fail. Certainly I'm not planning to fail, but I'm introducing the possibility that I might be wrong at this. I'm introducing the possibility that this might not turn out well, and I'm more interested in what I can learn from it than I am in being right about it. And I think those two things have always been at war for me, and I think probably for most human beings they're at war. It's the willingness to learn, or knowing that I'm going to be right. I can't learn something if I'm always going to be right. I think even back to taking my first steps, which obviously I don't remember, but I've watched my 4 kids take their first steps. And my word, every time a kid, a toddler, takes their first steps and learns to walk, every step is a willingness to fall down. They're so wobbly, that every step is a willingness to fail. And yet they're so interested and so determined to do it because they also know in this instinctive, inherent little brain of theirs that they want to walk so badly, they're willing to fall down on the next step every single time. And it's really strange how this works out. It's so predictable. Their willingness to fail on every step creates the ability to walk. And then our foster daughter is 18 months old, and now she's doing this funny running thing through the house, and it's kind of just like hopping from foot to foot to foot really fast. It's not quite running yet, but even at that, sometimes she takes a funny hop or she takes a funny jump as she's doing this funny running thing, and she falls and she trips. It's a willingness that the next step might put me on the ground that creates for her the ability to run. It is predictable. I think about her talking. Every time she says a word, she's willing to say it wrong. She has no idea that it's not the right way to say it. She doesn't care. She's trying out all these new words, and she says Molly's name, and sometimes it comes out very close to Molly. Sometimes it comes out like Lolly. Sometimes it just comes out blah, blah. She doesn't care. She's willing to say it incorrectly so many times until she gets it correct. And then somewhere along the line, so I think back to me, I'm sure I was the same way. Every toddler is the same way. The willingness to fall down on every step to walk. The willingness to fall down on the next step to learn to run. The willingness to not say a word correctly so many times until I say it correctly. And then somewhere along the line, I decided that it was not worth it to be wrong anymore. Somewhere along the line, I decided that I was not willing to be wrong to learn something. I just wanted to be right about it. And then I got to the dinner table and I asked my kids, what did you fail at today? And I wanted them to fail at something because I knew for sure, well, I wasn't failing at things. I wasn't doing new things. I wasn't trying new things. But I wanted them to fail at it because failing was the ticket to being a billionaire. That sounds a little facetious, but at the same time, I was trying to get them to fail. Hey, you fail. I'm not willing to fail, but you should fail. And I almost got frustrated that they weren't failing, but really the frustration was at me because I wasn't failing. And here's a side note I've also realized for myself. This is taking a bunny rabbit trail for a moment on this topic. There are times that I talk with people, there are times that I'm coaching people, and they are very reluctant to make a decision, or they're not following through on something they said they were going to do. And my initial reaction is almost like it triggers me in a way. And I get this initial burst of frustration. Why aren't you doing what you said you were going to do? Why don't you just decide and go do it? And I step away from the conversation. I'm like, I wonder how I could have helped them make a better decision. Or I wonder how I could have helped them, because I think the frustration, initially, I'm thinking the frustration is aimed at them, but really, the frustration is aimed at me because I recognize that for me, when somebody does something that frustrates me, it's something about me that's causing that reaction. And oftentimes when I get frustrated at somebody, it's because there's a sense inside of me that wants them to do the thing instead of me doing the thing. So when I get frustrated at somebody for not making a decision, or I get frustrated at somebody for not following through, what I know to be true about me is that I'm the one that I'm really getting frustrated at, because I'm working through growing and doing the things that I said I was going to do, to make a decision and follow through and lean into it. And they're not doing it is just a reminder to me that I'm also not doing it. So when I was getting frustrated at my kids for not failing at something, I wasn't really getting frustrated at them. That's what it looked like. But beneath the surface, I was getting frustrated at me because I was not willing to fail. And I wanted to live vicariously through them, to have them fail, but not me fail. And that's been several years ago, and even now as I look at that, I think what an unfortunate way of living, that I wasn't willing to fail, and yet I really, really, really wanted my kids, and I was almost expecting my kids just to go fail at something. Just go fail at something. Make me a proud dad and go fail at something. When I was not the one who was even beginning to do something to fail at. And not to fail at, but the willingness to fail. And I'm reminded of the story of Elon Musk. Like him or hate him, it doesn't matter. He, with SpaceX, I remember the story he told. He was doing a launch of one of the SpaceX rockets, and it failed twice. And SpaceX had enough money for a third launch. And if that third launch did not work out, they were done. They were bankrupt, done, out of money, kaput. And so what did he do? They put the money into the third launch. And the third launch was successful. And SpaceX is still alive as a company today. And I also think of him when he sold, I think it was PayPal, that he originally sold. He turned around and put almost all the money he got from PayPal, I think, into Tesla. He did things that he was willing to fail at. And were there some failures along the way? Sure, there were failures along the way, and if we define failures as something that didn't go the way I planned. But in the long term, they really weren't failures. They were just a step in a long succession of steps that leads to long-term success. And what I'm recognizing for me is the question is not to my kids or to myself, what did you fail at today? The question is, what did you do today that you are willing to fail at? What did you take a risk on today? What were you willing to learn today? And for me, I'm really seeing clearly, even through talking through this, that the willingness to learn is the willingness to fail. It's not hoping I fail, but it's embracing the fact that this idea about things not going the way I wanted them to is just a natural step on the way to long-term success and long-term significance. What are you willing to fail at? And the bigger the thing you're willing to fail at, the bigger the lesson you learn. And the bigger the lesson you learn, the better perspective you have on what you're doing. And I think about John Maxwell. Man, so many people are coming to mind here, but I think of John Maxwell. You know, he transitioned at one point in his career from being a pastor, doing everything in the religious world. He was a very successful pastor in terms of he was leading pastors. He was pastor of a very large church. He was writing books for people in church. And he made a transition from that world to the secular world. And he was willing to fail at it. I remember one of his books, he talked about the first conference he put on for non-Christian leaders. Just for secular leaders, I think 3 people showed up. And he was just pastoring a church of thousands and thousands of people. Now, 3 people showing up, was that a failure? I'm sure in the moment it felt like a failure. I'm sure in the moment it felt like, man, this did not go the way I was hoping it would go. But he was willing to fail at it. He was willing for an outcome that he didn't plan on. Because he knew in the long term, this was the path. This was the transition he wanted for his long-term career. And he's now been able to impact 10x more people in shifting his career because he was willing to fail and willing to be in a position where 3 people showed up to a conference when he was used to preaching to thousands of people every week. On a very personal note, this is me being vulnerable. I am leaning into the willingness to fail. I'm choosing to do things that won't turn out the way they want. These videos are a perfect example of them. These videos are not polished. These videos are raw and real. And sometimes they feel like when I'm done recording them and I post them, they kind of feel like a failure because I just feel like I'm rambling a little bit all over the place, and maybe I am. But I've set that up in the past to be a way of failing when I speak, to just completely ramble in this way. And yet I'm willing for nobody to see these videos. I'm willing to learn how to speak better, how to communicate better, how to convey my thoughts better. I'm willing to learn how to, silly little things. I didn't know how to get captions on my reels on Facebook for the first 15 videos. And then I learned. I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to fail. Those two things are not, they are mutually inclusive. They have to be the same thing. And I'll also say this, because I'm willing to be wrong about this. I'd really love to know in the comments if you disagree with me, because I'm willing to be wrong about this. This is the way that I'm seeing it for me right now and growing through this. And if you made it 15 minutes into this video, that's awesome. Thank you for listening. This video has been a lot of me thinking out loud with not necessarily a direct, specific message that I wanted to convey through the whole thing. Thanks for being my friend. Bye.